What's up, guys? This is a quick follow-up to the PS3 Overclocking video I made over a year ago now. I have recently become aware of some newer developments in regards to PS3 overclocking. Most of this stuff has been around for at least the past few months, I just haven't been following the PS3 scene that closely as of late. I figured I should make a follow-up though, seeing as my video was pretty much the definitive PS3 overclocking guide when it first released, and it's still one of the top results when you go looking today. If you watched that original video, which you should probably still do if you intend to try this, you'll recall that the biggest pain point with PS3 overclocking is the fact that the overclock was tied to the firmware. That meant you had to track down and install a specific custom firmware version that had been configured to use the overclock settings you wanted, and then do the same thing again every time you wanted to tweak the overclock. This also meant that if a given overclock was too unstable, you couldn't boot into recovery mode and install new firmware, and your console was essentially bricked. The only way to fix this was to open up the system and write new firmware directly to the motherboard with a hardware flasher. However, as of earlier this year, all of that is no longer the case. It is now possible to change overclock settings without reinstalling the firmware, and do so in a way that is fully reversible should the system become too unstable to boot. That's not to say that PS3 overclocking has magically become safe. You absolutely can kill your console doing this and should not attempt it on early FAT models, but the risk of a soft brick should be non-existent if you do everything correctly. To use the new overclocking method, the first thing you'll want to do is download the latest official version of the EvilNat custom firmware. A link to that is in the description. Just throw it on a USB drive and install it the same as any other custom firmware. This particular firmware includes Cobra version 8.5, which is what actually does the overclocking. Right now, EvilNat appears to be the only major custom firmware distribution to integrate this version of Cobra. Once you've got the firmware installed, shut off your PS3 and plug the USB drive back into your computer. On the root of the drive, you'll want to create a file called overclock.txt. This file is going to consist of two numbers. The first number is the target frequency of the PS3's RSX chip in megahertz, and the second number is the target frequency of the video memory. The RSX has to be set in intervals of 50 MHz, but the VRAM can be set in intervals of 25. The minimum and maximum frequencies for both these values are 300 MHz and 1050 MHz respectively. Once you've set your overclock, save the file and plug your USB drive into the rightmost USB port on the front of the console. That's the one closest to the Blu-ray drive. Turn on the PS3, and your overclock values should be applied. You can verify this by navigating to Custom Firmware Tools, Overclock Tools, check GPU VRAM overclock speed. If you don't want to have your USB drive permanently connected to the console just for overclocking, you can copy the overclock.txt file to the root of the PS3's internal hard drive, and it will be loaded from there instead. Personally, I'd do a bit of testing with the USB overclock before moving it to the hard drive, but the USB overclock settings will always take precedent. So if your hard drive overclock is unstable, you can just plug in a USB drive with different settings and be back in business. Also, since so many people asked in the comments of the first video, the XMB theme I'm using on my system is one of the many options included with the PS3 Ultimate Toolbox. I'll put a link to that down in the description. Now, if you're just looking to boost your PS3's performance a little bit, then this video is basically over. I've just covered all the new information that's relevant to your use case. However, if you're an insane person and want to burn your PS3 alive, there's been another development in the past year that will help to accomplish that. When I made my original video, the biggest limitation on RSX overclocking was the amount of power being supplied to the chip. That is no longer the case, as it's now possible to change the RSX core voltage. Doing this requires disassembling the console and writing to the EEPROM directly via a UART connection. This can allow the RSX to remain stable when overclocked to higher frequencies, however, it is extremely dangerous. Normally, overclocking the RSX is relatively safe, because you can't really push the system beyond what it was designed to handle in terms of power draw or heat output. As soon as you start messing with voltages though, that all goes out the window. Temperatures can jump up significantly with increased voltages, and you'll be putting a lot more strain on components like VRMs and capacitors. While a standard overclock may be slightly detrimental to your console long-term, a voltage-boosted overclock will 100% shorten its lifespan, or even kill it outright. It's for this reason that I am not going to be attempting a voltage boost on my PS3, and I don't recommend that you do either. Unlike the soft bricks I mentioned earlier, any bricks that result from overvolting are likely to be caused by component damage somewhere in the power delivery system. That can't just be reversed by flashing new firmware to the board. I'll leave links in the description to some resources on voltage modification, but seriously, do not try this unless you are prepared to kill your console. And that's it for this video. Huge shout out to my YouTube members who support the channel. You can join them at the link below, and otherwise give the video a like, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you guys later.